you know, the one thing about this kind of thing is it's just podcasting is kind of real. You just kind of real talks.
Right.
Sober is dope, and I talk about my sober journey a lot on my podcast. Obviously, anyone that's watched me in this journey, it's been like a reality TV show for some, and for most of my life, they've it's a horror film. But I'm here today because I'm sober. I found Christ. I found a reason to live, and when I came across this beautiful soul we're going to talk to here today, right here. It was that spirit that I felt, and I just want to go right over to him. Sober is dope, the founder. Let's talk about you. Just what's up with you? How did you come up with this? And you're bringing sober to a cool level. That's why I'm attracted to you. So talk about it.
Thank you. Well, I appreciate being part of the network and a part of your platform. My name is Pop Buchanan. So first and foremost, I'm a child of God. I'm a child of grace, and I'm a child of mercy. About 11 years ago, I was struggling with a terrible addiction to alcoholism, and I was literally on my deathbed. Like, I would be dead today if I didn't have some form of miraculous intervention. The ESPN version of my story is I had got on my knees in the middle of New York City. I'm from New York, and I pretty much asked God for a miracle because I was dying. I lost my place. I come from a really beautiful family. Out of college, I was doing really well. Ran a really big, prestigious real estate firm, and I had a lot of money coming in, and I had like a big brownstone in New York City at the age of 24, and I lived this kind of party lifestyle, but it spiraled out of control. And I didn't at the time, I didn't have too much information on addiction. At the time, it wasn't a big sober wasn't trending or anything like that. It was no online medium for me. It was just pretty much myself. I was just roaming around with this addiction, and I was stuck. I didn't know what was going on, but I was dying. It was really horrible. It was a dark period of my life. And literally, I got on my knees in the middle of the street. I threw what I call one spiritual Hail Mary, and I asked God for a miracle. And I told God honestly, I said, God, the devil's captured me. I'm absolutely captured. I don't want to die. I'm dying. Can you please help me if you're still there? I believed in you my whole life. I just need help. I don't want to die. And that's all I could do when I felt absolutely powerless, and I surrendered. And I literally, and I'm not making this up. This is honest. This is the backbone of my story. I heard a voice. I felt like I heard God speak to me, and that voice told me that how the voice came to me and what it exactly said is, done. Your prayers answered. I sent everyone. Get up and go to the hospital. And I literally followed that voice from that day to now. Like, I literally did everything and in my power. So I did. I got up off the middle of the street. I was in the middle of the street in New York City. Morning time, people walking by me. I'm crying. I'm on the floor. I must have looked crazy, man. But at that moment, I understood if I didn't absolutely surrender every aspect of who I was and to God, if I didn't give it all up, if I just didn't I had to totally surrender mind, body, and spirit. I had no other play. We know as in addiction, we tend to have plays. You know, how I'm gonna get this next bottle, how I'm gonna get this next hit, who I'm gonna hustle today. I had no more hustle left. I was just gonna die. And I got on that knee. I gave it all back. I said, God, if you're there, and I could not, it was like, I was like, if I get a message back, I'm never going to play again in my life. I'm never going to play with God. I'm not playing with anything. And when I heard that voice, I'm telling you, I literally was the most excited man on the planet because I got up and I'm like, yes, this is my last run. I have it. I still have a shot because I literally thought I was going to die. So, long story short, I got up, I jumped the turnstile in New York City, went to 14th Street, following that voice, and I found a hospital. And I went into the hospital. It was a detox, I remember, and I had no insurance, no idea, anything on me. And I'm sitting there, the nurses trying to do the nurses doing her intake, and at some point it looked like they was about to close. And the nurse came out and she said, young man, I don't know if I could get you insurance. I don't know if we could get you in. You know, the day's about to wind down. The insurance company's not calling us back. And I literally started crying, man. I told that nurse, I said, listen, if I go back out into that street, I'm going to die, man. God told me to come here. I need help. I don't want to die. I was panicking because I just did everything. But at that point, I didn't believe I thought they was going to turn me away. Then the nurse said, you know what? I'm going to do one thing. I'm going to try one thing for you. And she made a phone call and she called the director of that department in that hospital. And it was this old black guy who came down. He came off the elevator, had a cowboy hat on, cool, old, smooth black guy. And she said, you see that guy over there? He runs this whole department in New York City. It was a Catholic hospital. And she was like, he runs that whole department. You talk to him, you be honest with him. So I go over to him. I'm like, excuse me, sir, I'm here. I need help. He looked at me. He said, young man, you too young to be in here. What you doing here? And I told him, I said, I'm struggling with addiction and alcohol, and I don't want to die. I need help. I'm here. If you could help me, I promise. And he looked at me dead in my eyes. He said, young man, if I help you, I'm going to be taking a bed away from someone who really wants to help. So you promise me, are you going to fly straight? And that was the moment in my life where I looked at him and I was like, I get it. I get it. People tend to play around. And I said, sir, if you help me today, I promise by the grace of God, I will fly straight for the rest of my life. And he said, young man, congratulations. Go to that nurse. Go to get your badge and stuff. Go to the third floor. Welcome to Detox. That was 11 years ago. That act of mercy is what propelled the Sober is Dope podcast, the Sober is Dope company, my mission to share my story on how God's mercy and that man's mercy and that nurse's mercy helped me to kick addiction and to start my 1 to 2 year journey of rehabilitation. So that's how my story started, and that's where I'm at today. I'm Pop Buchanan, the founder of Sober is Dope. I was compelled by God's mercy to share my story with the world. It's my mission, it's my service-based mission to give back. Because I believe if I could come back from addiction and be 11 years sober, that anyone can. Because I was jammed up, I was at the bottom, beyond rock bottom, and I'm here. So that's my story.
Hey man, listen, thank you for sharing it. Thank you for being so to the real, on it, because we need more real people talking about this, these tragedies that go unnoticed, and sometimes they just go to the point where, oh, we knew, that one was going to make it because he drank himself to whatever, or, that reckless behavior. But you, for the grace of God, found that moment. And when that gentleman looked you in the eyes, that moment, I love that part of the story because it's a real story. I mean, this is like something you make on TV, but it's real. It's you. How did it affect the people in your life when you made that decision? The people around you that had seen you, the closest people, did they trust you? Did they push you away? Did they welcome you? Did they support you? How was the reaction?
It was a beautiful story on how it all came together. So what happened was, from the moment when I got on my knees and I asked God for that help, and then I got into detox, it was about, I would say, 5 days in detox, right? And what happens is, and most people don't know this, is when you go from detox, you have to have like an exit interview with a counselor. This is where most people tend to kind of mess up, You have two options. You can either go to rehab or you go back on the streets, right? After detox, most people like, no, I feel great. I'm going to go back on the street. What did I tell you guys in the beginning? When I heard that voice, I made a decision. Then I'm going all the way, and I would no longer bullcrap myself or God. So at that exit interview, the counselor asked me, what do you want to do? I said, I do not want to leave treatment. If I could go from here somewhere else, I don't care if you got to send me to the mountains with the monks. I don't care if you got to send me with the nuns. I don't care where I have to go, but I don't want to go back on the streets. I really want to get this kick for good. And I had enough information to know that detox is not enough, right? For me, it wasn't enough for me. So the guys put me into an outpatient rehabilitation, a 6-month outpatient rehabilitation program where I had to live with people in a shelter-like environment that was being paroled from jail into a drug program. So in New York City, they had this program where if you get time off your sentence and you're paroled in, you all go to this what they call 3-quarter house. It's like a apartment unit, and you have a curfew. You have to go to drug program. You have to go to treatment, and that's where I went. I was the only kid in there that wasn't coming from jail, right? So I'm sitting in there like all these guys is coming, like these guys is coming in straight from jail, but I'm in the same state program. So I learned everything. 6 months of going to treatment. But to go back to your question, from that period when I was on my knees to that point to when I got into this program, the residential program, it was about 2 weeks, right? So this is 2 weeks in my life where no one heard from me, no one knew where I was, right? I could have been dead, my family, I fought with everyone, no one wanted to talk to me, so no one knew I was in treatment. This is around Christmas of 2012. Christmas Day 2012 is the first time I left the residential program I was in to go out, right? So I spent the whole day. It's my first Christmas, right? I'm telling you, I got on my knees and about December, like I said, December 12th is my sober date. That's the day I got on my knees, right? That's the day this whole thing's happened. So by December 25th, I looked totally different, man. I got clothes from Goodwill. I had on this. I was sending you the picture if I could find it. I look much younger. It's 11 years ago. I look good though, and I planned my day like this. I'm gonna go to Alcoholics Anonymous in the morning. They had this all-day program for people who didn't want to be by themselves on Christmas, right? So I went in the morning and I stayed all the way to the evening, and it was just meeting after meeting after meeting. And then I made a phone call to my sister, and the phone rang, and she starts crying on the phone. She goes, "Pop," they call, "Pop, is that you?" I say, "Yes." "How are you guys doing? What are you guys doing for Christmas? It's Christmas time. Can I come over? Can I see my family?" They were all by my mother's house. It's all in Brooklyn. So she's like, "Yeah, everyone's over here. We'll love to see you. Come by." I was nervous because at this point, my mom wasn't speaking to me. My brothers weren't speaking to me. No one were talking to me, right? Everybody had enough, but they didn't know I was in treatment. And when I rang that bell, and I'm telling you, I walked into my house, my whole family down to the kids started crying, man. They could not believe how cleaned up I got, how I looked. And they all accepted me with open arms, man. It was beautiful. I had this big, beautiful coat. It was like the King's jacket. It was like a beautiful black London fog coat with fur on it. It was at the height of my success, right? I thought I lost that jacket. My baby brother had it. He brought it out almost like you kind of like giving the king back his like kind of like garment.
The cape. Yeah, you're getting the cape on you, man.
He said you're not gonna be complete till you get your jacket back, man.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I put on my coat and I just sat there and I played with the kids, and the adults did their thing, and my brothers drove me back to treatment. And to fully answer your question, from that day to now, 90% of my family don't drink no more. At our parties, we have no alcohol. My mother was able to get off of drinking. My girlfriend who struggled just celebrated 1 year. My brothers, my ability to take that step and transform everyone's life. So to answer your question, it was an amazing decision. And I think it saved everyone's in my family, all of us.
This is cool, man. I like your story, man. I like your energy. And did you feel like when you were growing up, did you always feel like you were a little different than other people? Or did you
I was
feel like
different.
That's what I'm asking. I mean, did you?
Yeah, man. they call me Poppy for a reason, bro. My name, I had so much energy. I was like, I'm tame. I'm like tame, right? My recovery tamed me, but I was naturally a super energetic, big personality. And I think that's why addiction didn't mince well with me, because I was already over the top. I was already running in, jumping and flipping and dancing and crazy.
I don't want to call you a Bobby Brown, impersonator, but you got that energy from Bobby Brown back in the day when he was always like, wow,
Yeah,
kind of like
right,
excited,
right,
you got
right.
that.
So
And
I was
entertaining too.
always,
You're entertaining. Like, so that's the other thing is you have a natural entertaining part about you. You know what I mean?
thank you. Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, that's where I came from, the music. I'm a music artist and
Right.
amongst other things. So I have that energy. So yeah, I was always different. And the thing of the addiction just brought out the most extreme part of me, and in time it just wasn't the best aspect of me. So I'm much better in sobriety. So
100%. And it's an amazing story. So when you're talking about your story and you share it now, why did you want to get into sharing it at a higher level with the podcast, with just getting out and broadcasting how sobriety has changed your life? And you share obviously the journey with God in this story, which is a true life story of your success, why you're here today. Your testimony says it. I mean, going back into that house at Christmas, just
right.
dressed to impress, and that amazing part of the story. So where do you go from there? How do you then get back into serving, but like this with the podcast? Where did that turn happen?
So I had this big kind of like so I was so serious about my recovery that I didn't really talk about any aspect of my journey until about 5 years into my recovery. So I just did the work. I didn't really broadcast it. I was a normal guy. Went back to work. I got a good job, and I just went back to like building my life. I started doing music again. Um and I was just working on the creative aspects of myself and just putting my life back together and just enjoying it. The thing was, I was living life at such a high capacity, and I was so happy that one day I was sitting down and so to give you guys some context, I came up with the name Sober is Dope in rehab, right? Me and the guys used to always sit there and laugh, and we're New Yorkers, and I would say stuff like, yo, those your sneakers are dope. That movie was dope. And then one day we all looked at each other and then we was like, sober is dope. And I was like, yeah, sober is dope. And that's how it stick. And they used to call me Mr. Sober is Dope in rehab. I was the guy who always had all of the science and information and all. I was always I was teaching people how to meditate, pray. Because I already knew all of these things. Like I come from a really beautiful family. My brother's a Catholic priest. At a young age, I was in martial arts, meditation. I studied Zen. I studied Tai Chi. I studied all these things. But in my recovery, I use a lot of those aspects to maintain my recovery, right? So when I came up with the name Sober is Dope, it was because later on, it all connected. I was living this life, and I'm like, wait a minute, sobriety is fun. It's this thing is really good, and I felt like something in me was like, I can't live at this heightened capacity without sharing it with other people. Like I just didn't want to keep it to myself. I felt like it was so selfish. And then when I reconnected with that mercy that God had on me when I got on my knees that day, right? I said, well, wait a minute. God came to me in this miraculous way. I have to take that blessing and share it with other people, because I would be in New York and I would see a homeless person sitting there looking like they're going to die. I would see someone that's strung out. I would see people dealing with addiction. I would have friends dealing with this stuff. And I'm like, I got to help these guys. And I felt helpless. But the most efficient way to help someone is by telling your story. That's the most efficient way to do it, right? Because if you can't physically or monetarily help someone, or you're not God, so you can't always just magically transform someone's mind and spirit on the spot. You have to tell your story and hope to inspire. And that's what I did. So I said, 5 years in, now this is the thing. I'm a big proponent that if you're in early recovery, I encourage people to really do the work, right? Sometimes people get sober, they're 1 month sober and they're like, oh, I wrote a book and I want to do a podcast. And I'm like, no. You got to go back. Your brain's not even settled yet. You have to really go do the work. So I didn't want to do anything until I had that security in myself that I was really on the right track. So I waited 5 years into my recovery and I came out and I said, I'm going to start the podcast. I'm going to tell my story. I started Sober is Dope roughly about 6 years ago. And the rest is history. I wrote the Sober is Dope book. I wrote the book last year. Well, no, I published the book last year. I was writing the book for about 3 years. And it all came full circle. And I felt like to recover out loud and to share your story. And the initial goal of Sober is Dope is to reach 1 million active addicts in the attempt to help them understand that life on the other side of addiction is truly beautiful. There's a misconception that people hold in addiction that I'm not going to be interesting if I'm sober. How am I going to have fun when I'm sober? How I'm going to connect and have sexy time when I'm sober? They feel like somehow their addiction validates them, but it's actually the biggest lie in the world. You know, you're absolutely way more powerful and way more worthy in your recovery than you'll ever be in your addiction. And I try to show people that so they could be inspired to keep going.
It's the inspiration I'm sure that you're showing is working. Listen, you're infectious. You got some kind of energy about you that you put off, and it's really interesting to hear the ground pounding story from where you came from. There's more to the story, I know, because you talk to your family, and I'm kind of assuming your family was an organized family unit growing up. Did you come up with a normal family upbringing, or
right?
Talk a little bit about that.
I came mom and dad at home, Catholic school, beautiful family. The thing was, the catalyst was my dad.
You're kind of like an anomaly in a sense then, because of the opposite of a lot of broken homes seem to be, the funnel system that we see in these areas. So it was even unique that you came from that family unit, yet still found that path, unfortunately.
Absolutely, right. Well, so I'm not a spring chicken. I'm 44 years old. I was born in 1979.
Yes,
so
sir.
what I try to tell people is, I came up in a really cool culture in the 80s and in the 90s. A lot of drinking was just around festivity. It was like a pastime. My mom and dad would get dressed up in beautiful outfits. She'll have on like a nice evening dress. My dad would have on a suit. His friends will have on suits. They will cook a big feast. They'll play music. They'll drink, and they'll drink all night. But you never saw anyone get crazy, right?
Right.
So it was this culture where drinking was part of like it was just like this romantic, historic look. And for me, I realized that some people are born just naturally allergic and are naturally predisposed to becoming addicted. And I was just one of those outliers in my family because some of my siblings didn't necessarily have issues with drinking like I did. It just really hit me hard. My mom told me when I was a younger kid, she said, don't drink. I don't think you'll do, I don't think you need to. Because I told you I had all of this abnormal amount of energy. It was abnormal. She told me you have naturally high serotonin levels. Your brain is different from other people's. You shouldn't drink. She tried to warn me. I didn't know what she was really trying to warn me. She told me this when I was really young. So by the time I was introduced to alcohol, it hit me and grabbed me, and it couldn't shake, right? But I try to teach people, how can you go from a normal person or come from a normal background with where people may have drank and did stuff and really didn't have an issue into full-blown addiction? It's usually from the brain and trauma and some type of pain. And I think a lot of it for me was unresolved bereavement issues with my father dying. He was my hero, man. My dad died in my house right in front of me. He had a heart attack. I was only 13. I was so young, impressionable, and I loved him, and I just couldn't believe it. So from 13 to 15, I was kind of like a rebel. I kind of just shunned God. I was pissed. I was angry. At the time, we didn't do any counseling or anything like that. And life just kind of went on, but I was still holding the anger that my dad died, man. Like, why did my dad die? He was only 52, right? I'm 44. So I'm like, that was too young for someone to die, right? And I was just pissed. And that trauma kind of was one of the things that later on led to me kind of just being kind of like angry and hurt. And I realized I never really dealt with that. So part of Sober is Dope is me I tell people you have to deal with trauma, you have to deal with pain, you have to deal with grief, you have to deal with loss, you have to deal with that breakup, that divorce. It changes your brain through neuroplasticity. It creates a mental health component. We don't talk enough about the link between mental health and addiction. That's called comorbidities or comorbid addiction, when you have an addiction that could fuel the mental health or the depression, and the depression could fuel the addiction. So if you treat the addiction, you have to also treat the mental illness or the mental damage or the mental health aspects that the addiction caused also. So for me, I had to do two parts. I had to deal with the death of my father. I had to deal with the loss of the girlfriend. I had to deal with the loss of the business, the money, the real estate. I lost a lot in my addiction. I lost a lot of my life, and I had to deal with that in order for me to stay sober and not fall back to that regressive pattern of woe me, I'm upset with the world, and my unresolved grief issues. So I hope that answers your question.
Well, the question is clear, and it was a great, it was an answer. It was clear. Listen, I think I share your journey, not to overstep anything in your story. This is about you today. But I share a lot of the similar things you've gone through, from visiting my own mom in the same prison that I retired from. I was visiting her when I was a kid, right? And so then, and then being on my podcast, which, the interesting part about what you said about starting the podcast you did, I was in this podcast business while I went from where I was addicted to alcohol to where I am now, and the struggles, where have been right here, video, diary of me. And so I share this journey with such a need to just tell people the truth. And you just laid it out, man. You said something about your dad, and you kind of opened up to that wound. Men in general in this country, we don't open up enough, do we?
No,
Men.
no, we don't.
That's a problem. That mental health key is connected right to that piece, right? Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, absolutely. Toxic masculinity, um, false bravado, hubris, false pride. It tends to keep us stuck in our way, and it makes us inflexible for change. So I encourage men that vulnerability, emotional flexibility, emotional sobriety, knowing yourself, doing the introspection, doing the work, taking extreme accountability, and seeking forgiveness of oneself is key. You can't do any of this unless you forgive yourself. Before you try to ask others to forgive you, you have to come to a place where you forgive yourself for your shortcomings and your mistakes. And so we could grow from there. So that's the message.
It's interesting, and it's a great message, and kind of the message kind of goes along to the dialogue of what needs to take place in this country is these conversations, right? Like,
Right.
we're all talking about all this political stuff that we have no say in the matter anyways. At the end of the day, we all know this is a dividing, country of conversations. Why not bring it together? So right there, I say back to you is I get with the concepts of the trade-off to these kind of ventures, right? These opportunities where actually truth being told about both sides of the lies, not the story of the actual particular delivery of these lies. I don't care if it's Republican or Democrat, that doesn't matter. It's the lies that we've been told about mental health, the medicines that have been forced by pharmaceutical into causing a distinct uptick in mental health services in our country, directly connected to certain medicines that have been used on our people, endorsed by the federal government. So how do you contend it? I mean, and there's population specific, we know in the history of this country, which I don't need to say to you, sir, that have been targeted by our own government for these purposes. Is there any fear of that? This might be a bizarre question, but it's actually fear. I fear that the pressures sometimes overwhelm people and they get scared about this when it comes to sobriety, because the dependency sometimes it looks like the government grew the dependency.
Yeah. Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. I understand where you're coming from. I tell people, like, you have to know yourself. And I think that I think a good treatment program protects people from that in a sense, because when I say it's this comorbid relation, They
Right.
have comorbid treatment centers where you're going. For me, for example, when I went into my treatment center, I sat with a psychiatrist, I sat with an addiction counselor, two different people. My addiction counselor had to do a good enough job to say, I think Joe needs to see a psychiatrist. I don't think it's a clear cut addiction issue here. I think he's dealing with mental health issues. And I was depressed because I lost a lot. I was just a sad kid. It started from me just losing my girl. I was just mad. My addiction made me lose my girl. I was like, man, I really thought I lost. I thought I still could hold on to that. And when that last leg dropped, I was like, man, I'm done. And I was so upset. And the point being is, with the right type of counseling and the right type of guidance, you could avoid a lot of the pitfalls and the abuse. But I do think with mental health and the mental health, whether it's pharmacology, which is the prescription of medicines, whether it's um, just getting a diagnosis. I think there is good aspects to mental health treatment. I think there's many cases where people need to take their medications. I think there is a negative stigma with medications um, in the mental health area. And I think that fear keeps a lot of people from getting the help that they need. I don't think a lot of this treatment is supposed to be very long term. For me, I only had to be on one medication for about 6 months. They just wanted me to get my doctors were good. They was like, your serotonin levels are down here. We're trying to get them here because the average person's level of happiness is here, and you're all the way down here. But you appear to be normally energetic and happy, but you're so sad that it's just a mask. So we got to try to help you with that. So my
Understood.
thing was, it was very healthy, but it's just not a one size fits all. For me, it wasn't just going to a psychiatrist and taking medication. I had to exercise. I had to change my diet. I had to change my sleep patterns. I had to do affirmations. I had to change the way I spoke to myself. I had to learn how to connect spiritually with myself. I had to embrace a higher power. I had to really push myself. I had to use creativity as a means. In addition to going to Alcoholic Anonymous and 12 steps, in addition to being in rehab, and in addition to seeing a psychiatrist and getting a biopsych social and doing the mental health work. On Sober is Dope, we have something called the all-in approach. You have to do everything in your power to stay motivated in your recovery and to stay on your journey, or you run the risk of potentially relapsing. And once you start to let up, the work takes a long time. So for me to get to this place at 11 years, it wasn't like I was just sitting there like, yay, I'm sober, go me. I had to really do the work. I'm still doing the work. So my thing to answer your question is, yeah, I don't really align with the people who target and the people who, in the aspects of the government and the world that exploit people through mental health, or they prescribe people stuff they may not need, and all of the shady dark side of the stuff. My advice is, really try to do your research, go to somebody that's reputable, go to a psychologist that understands your culture and your needs, maybe. And just try to really get the help that you need. It starts like this, though. You need to get a biopsych social. A biopsych social is a step on your diagnosis journey. They can't diagnose you really without a biopsych social. It's like this test where they ask you like almost 1,000 questions about your life, everything from your parents, being a kid. I never answered this many questions in my life, but that's how they get a really good aspect of who you are, your social economic background, your genetic background, your trauma background, and then the psychiatrist could then safely diagnose you, or probably as closely accurately as possible. And then from there, determine if medication is needed. Sometimes medication is not needed, but to ignore your mental health in an addictive environment sets you up for failure. Remember, you have two aspects of treatment. You have to deal with the trauma, the mental health side, and you have to deal with the addiction side. They're totally separate, but they overlap, and that's why we call it comorbidities.
Well, this is exactly, in where I wanted to go in 2024 on this particular platform. We were just talking before we went live into record. my journey, getting sobriety, but getting inspiration for others. I want to share that message. This platform is it's all about that message. So how can people find where you are? I want to make sure everyone, I know we have you scrolling here on the ticker here. We have all your platforms, but talk a little bit about the platforms and some of the stuff you have coming up. Maybe, I don't know if you have concerts, if you have outings or parties or revivals or whatever we can do to help you support your platform. Let us all know about it.
Thank you. Well, the best way to support Sober is Dope, and the number one place you can find us is at soberisdope.com. All right. Now, soberisdope.com, you'll have access to the Sober is Dope book, which is on Amazon. All right. I suggest people look into getting this. If you need prayers, affirmations, and testimony, I realized there was a space in the book category for addiction that left out God. I just was like, listen, my story started with me getting on my knees and praying to God. So I had to write a book about prayers for people who was in a dark place. You could get the book, you could get the podcast, which is one of the most important things. We have over 350 episodes on the Sober is Dope podcast. We cover everything you could imagine on Sober is Dope. We go into deep science, addiction science, mental health, spiritual, life optimization, and everything you could imagine. How to deal with trauma, how to avoid relapse if you're sober and struggling. Rumination station, how to get out your negative toxic thoughts, actionable tips. Sober is Dope podcast is solid. So I would say start at soberisdope.com. Find me there. And the main hub is on Instagram and TikTok at Sober is Dope. We have 49,000 active people in the recovery space that's communicating and following us in our community on Instagram. So it's a really vibrant hub. 49,000 people in recovery. I never thought I'll see something like that. Our goal is to get to 1 million, but it's still real. So you can follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Sober is Dope. That's where that's where you can reach me. You can inbox me, you can find me. Now, if you're struggling and you want to talk to me personally, you can find me at soberisdopebook at gmail.com. All right. And that's how you find us. Sober is Dope, and Google Sober is Dope. If not for nothing, just type in Sober is Dope on Google and we should come up number one. And lastly, we also have the Sober is Dope album. It's a music album that I created to not disconnect myself from my creative calling. And it's kind of cool. It goes through my whole little story. It has like testimonies in between. You can find that on Apple Music, Spotify. Sober is Dope, the album. And we have a really beautiful song for the addiction community called Dear Addicts, where I write a letter to anyone that's dealing with addiction. And it's just a beautiful song. So go find us on Spotify, support, share. There's not a lot of people making music about recovery, not a lot of people doing it. So I wanted to be there. So you have the books, you have the podcast, and you have the music, and that's my contribution.
Praise Jesus. Here we go. Thank you so much, Pop. Listen, I like your spirit. I think there's more for you and I to talk about, and right. I'd like to connect with you. We'll set something up for a call, because I think there's some things that are on my heart right now that I'd like to talk to you about, and opportunities. I think that I'm just God's speaking right now to me. So I just want to say thank you again.
Yo, thank you, and I would love to connect. Kevin, anytime you need anything you need, I'll always be there. You part of Sober is Dope. 1 year is serious, brother. And the work that's going to take you from 1 year to 10 years, we got it. We got all the answers. So if you ever get stuck, you always got first class access to Pop Buchanan, and I'll help you, brother.
Man, praise Jesus. Thank you so much, Pop. This is amazing. Thank you again. I'm just going to say thank you. And guys, go and check this out. This is something you don't want to. We're going to drop this, and we're going to repeatedly drop this and promote it. Thanks again, Pop, for coming on tonight right here. And there you go. So this is what we do when we do it. This is a great interview, and this is about real people and the real deal story of somebody's journey, going from the life that he was living in. And as he said, as a normal, homestead, and, mom and dad in these scenarios, and that one tragic moment in his life that could bring a man to his knees. And it's, that connection to his dad, and yet even some other things that brought him to his knees, and then eventually almost crippling him until he realized he had one more chance, and that one more chance from a doctor, right, in a hospital with a cowboy hat on, and that whole story that goes on, and what an amazing story right up to the 11 years of sobriety. And so I'm just honored to have Pop on with us, and I hope you really reach out if you have any questions. We will be scrolling this, we'll be promoting this, and I'm sure we're also going to be having Pop back on again really near future. In the meantime, remember, this and every one of our episodes brought to you by Cash Map. Cash Map. Cash Map app is the one map app that you can download today that can take all of your bills, put them into one neat little folder, and help you pay down everything and the interest in a controlled way, which will save you money at the end of the day. That's right. Cash Map is a proprietary platform and program that was put together, and its founder, Dennis Williams, officially, the sponsor deals are going back and forth between the negotiating team, but Cash Map is one of our primary sponsors, the national brand launching on this year right here with this platform. Go and check them out. Let them know the Kevin Allen Show sent you to get a special one-on-one with Dennis Williams, founder. You get that Cash Map answer. Once you get that Cash Map, you'll be saving money. And give me a holler so you can take me out for an ice cream or something, or cupcakes, or I don't know, maybe a coffee. I like coffee. I like this show too. I hope you guys enjoyed this. This is where it's at, and continue to stay prayed up. The Prayed Up Network. Kevin Allen.